Hello, world. It's me, Dennis. In part one of my reasonably spontaneous conversation with Lois Lowry, we learned about her journey into writing that led to her becoming one of the most acclaimed authors of young adult literature in the world. Here in part two, we begin with her sharing about the inklings of her most famous novel, The Giver.
Even though you and I have not rehearsed this conversation, it is for me falling into place neatly because much later, but now I've described to you that first book about the death of my sister, but now years pass and I write a number of other books, some of which I'm still very fond of. And then came a time when my father and mother were both in a nursing home in Virginia. I lived in Boston at the time, and I would fly down there maybe once every 2 months to visit them both. Mother was in the nursing care part. She was blind and on oxygen. Her mind was totally intact, and we would sit there and she would reminisce. I sometimes took a tape recorder, and I'm one of the few people who actually did ask my mother before she died all those questions. Any rate, and then when she tired, and she often talked about my sister, of course. When she got tired, I would go to the other section of the same nursing facility where my father was in assisted living. He was
Mhm.
up shuffling around and could, manage most of his life, but he was experiencing some memory lapses. So my brother and I had prepared a photograph album full of old photographs that would bring back memories for Dad. Dad was a car guy. There was a Chrysler he loved in 1954. And, oh, yeah, I love that car, he would say. There was a dog that he hated. Uh, there was our house in Japan, our house in Honolulu. At any rate, turning the pages, there is a picture now of two little blonde girls smiling at the camera. And my father says, "Oh, there you are with your sister." And then he says, looking a little abashed, "I can't remember her name." And I said, "Her name was Helen, Dad. She was named for her grandmother." Moment passed. And then he said, "Whatever happened to her?" And I had to say, "She died, Dad." And because it took him by surprise and saddened him so, I turned the page and there was another house, another car, another dog. And he immediately forgot that moment of sadness. Okay, continue turning the pages. Suddenly, there are the two girls again. Now they're teenagers, smiling at the camera. And he says, "Oh, there you are with Helen." And then he said, "I can't remember what happened to her." And I had to say again, "She died, Dad." When I was driving back to the airport to fly home in my rental car, I thought, and this is what writers often think that triggers an idea. I thought, what if, what if there were a way we could manipulate the human brain so that it didn't have to remember anything sad or scary, bad moments in the past? What if we could just obliterate those, zap them away somehow? It was at a time when it was time to write a new book. I'd written many by then. And there was always a period of time when a new one is about to be published, but I haven't yet started the next one. And I think, oh, I'll never have another idea. Uh, I'll be poor, destitute. I'll never, all of that.
The writer's lament that happens. Every actor, every writer, we have this is the normal part of our process.
Yes, poor me. Anyway, on the plane, I started thinking about, here, down the line in the future, we don't know how far in the future, a group of people, I ended up calling it the community, who had found a way to do that. I didn't have to go into the science of it. Who knows how they had done it, but they had gotten rid collectively of anything in the past that was troubling. In addition to that, I realized only afterward, in creating that community and describing it, I was drawing on a lot of the army posts I lived on, the housing, Everybody lives in a, except the high-ranking officers, as my father was in his later years. We had the big houses, and the local
Exactly.
ones, and there were rules, and we adhered to those rules, and the rules made us feel very safe and organized, but at the same time there was something creepy about it. I can
Yeah.
remember one army post we lived on. Guys came to mow our lawn and trim our bushes, and they were guarded by soldiers with guns because they were out of the military prison.
They were in
I,
the brig. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So all of that came together to create that particular book, which became and has remained the most popular of
Right.
my books. And
You
even,
have, go ahead.
excuse me, even though it was published in whatever year, say 1993 perhaps, which again, I can't do the math quickly, it was a long time ago. I still every day get emails, used to be letters, now it's emails about that book. It's in 26 languages, I think. I get letters from in languages I can't even identify, much less translate.
It is, and it's extraordinary because when I look at this and when I read it, it is as contemporary today because the way you wrote it, there aren't any. It would fit with taking out because you would understand that they would never allow social media.
Yeah, yeah,
This would not be something that you would because you would then begin to be getting into areas that you couldn't that you wouldn't want to get into.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And Joshua and so Joshua and Fiona and
I get
Asher
his name wrong, Jonas.
Jonas. I thank you. You know, it's so funny. I said that to myself when I was preparing for this. I said, I'm going to forget Asher's name. I'm going to forget Asher's name. So I kept going, and then I do it with Jonas. So thank you so much. All right, so you get this, and how? So our director Renee met the giver through the movie. So she goes to the movie first, and then goes back into that. I go the opposite direction.
Yeah,
So I read the book first, and I've run it in it, and then I see the movie, and I as often happens, that have a difficult time when I see the movie because I've already created the movie in my head, and so I have to deal with not just the
yeah.
characters, but how they had to go into a 2 hour and into a constructive format. So how did you deal with that? And were you asked at all to contribute in the process of when the movie began? I'm sure that's a
Yeah.
whole story in itself.
It's an interesting question. There have been other movies of some of my books, and there's one under option right now. And by and large, they never consult the author. You
Right,
sign away.
exactly. That's
And
a common.
I came to terms with that. I thought, okay, the movie is a different thing. The book still exists, and okay. But then when The Giver was, for lack of a better word, I started to say purchased, but optioned by Jeff
Mhm.
Bridges,
Yes.
who wanted to make a movie that his father was still alive, Lloyd Bridges. I don't know if you remember Lloyd
Are
Bridges.
you kidding? Sea Hunt? I was like this fan. That's where I interact with him and Bo and all. I'm a big fan.
Okay. Well, Lloyd was still alive, and Jeff wanted to direct the film. I think he had never directed a film and wanted to star his father in it. And then I don't remember details. This goes way back. They couldn't raise the money, and it
Mhm.
kind of fell apart for a number of years.
Normal Hollywood part that
Yeah,
happens.
yeah, yeah. And then all of a sudden, it came back together because Harvey Weinstein's company put up the
Yep.
money. But now Lloyd Bridges has died. But Jeff Bridges is old enough to play the role. So I had gotten to know Jeff Bridges slightly earlier. And now he reappears, and the movie is going to be made. And they find a director, Philip Noyce. And to my astonishment, they did involve me to a certain extent. And in fact, they very kindly let me, not let me, gave me a plane ticket to go to, they filmed it in South Africa. So I went to South Africa and watched them film for a week, which was a lot of fun. I confessed to them that my real interest in filmmaking is in editing. And so it was edited back in New York, and they let me go down to New York and sit in the editing studio for a while. And I did contribute one very important thing to the editing process. But back to the movie itself. Before the filming began, they showed me the screen tests, but it was all a matter of, we will share this with you. Here it is. It's not, do you approve? I mean, it was more, this is what we've decided. We're going to cast this person and this person. Okay. One thing they told me was that they had decided to make the age of the kids in the movie older. In the book, of course, the kids are all just turning 12. I love the age 12 to write about because it can go in so many different directions. But
A great age. That was what touched me so much is that time is because it was 12, and I know that that first
yeah,
time when the flood of hormones hit,
yeah,
and
yeah,
of course we're not taking the
yeah. Anyway, that they explained to me, and I understood this. Two reasons for that. One, if they had 12-year-olds and were using 12-year-old actors, the law required them to limit the number of hours each child could work. It would increase the time it took to make the movie to the extent that it would very much increase the cost of making the movie. But perhaps more importantly, their research had shown that teenagers, at that time, a large part of movie audiences, I don't know if this is still true, teenagers would go to a movie about teenagers, but they wouldn't go to a movie about 12-year-olds. So, okay, they decided that the kids in the movie, the age is unnamed, but they seem to be 17 or 18. And then, of course, here's always the problem with making a movie. With a book, you can be introspective and you can be inside the head of the main character and you can describe his thoughts. You can't do that in a movie. You have to show everything and you have to add action. I could certainly have done without the car chase. Was there an airplane? I mean, just all.
right, yeah, where Asher comes, yeah.
Uh, However, that was what they decided for movie reasons, and it was fine. They did seek my advice. They had me come out to Los Angeles before they began filming, and it was at a time when they were still doing costuming and things of that sort. And they showed me, they let me choose certain things, unimportant things.
Sure.
But it was a nice feeling of being somewhat included.
You got an opportunity to go into the editing room.
Yeah, there was the final scenes are set in snow, and the movie was filmed in South Africa, where there was a lot of different topography, and there was desert and there was forest,
Sure.
and they do all of that, but there was no snow. So they filmed that in, I believe it was Utah in the wintertime, and they schlepped all the cast over there, including the two South African twins. If they have babies in a movie, they have to hire twins because each baby can only work for 20 minutes at a time. And I was there when they filmed the scene where the father kills an infant.
Yep.
And there was a nurse standing on the side. And at one point she looks at her watch and she says, "Stop." And they take the one baby away and they bring out the twin baby, and the filming resumes.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to bring the babies and the babies' nursemaids and the babies' parents and everybody to Utah. I didn't go to Utah to watch that, but they found a house and there was snow and they were filming there. And somehow they had shown me the scenes that they filmed. And there is one scene where the boy and the baby I haven't seen it in a long time, but they've fallen off the sled. They're
Hmm.
lying in the snow, and the baby is crying. And the baby suddenly stops crying and looks up and is clearly hearing something. Okay. And I thought that was a wonderful moment. Before they find their destination, the baby hears something, is aware of something. So when I'm in the editing room in New York and they're showing me that snow scene, I thought, wait a minute, where is that moment when the baby hears something and looks up? And it was on the cutting room floor. And when I called it to their attention, what a wonderful moment it was. They put it back in. So it is a movie.
Isn't that wonderful?
I wouldn't talk
But there you, well, there it goes. All right. Well, there, I, I love the fact that this is a gift that just continues to keep on giving, and you continue to get the emails, and you continue to do this. Now, both of us, we are in our fourth quarter of our lives, and we're looking at what do you see of 2024? What excites you? What engages you? What are you curious about, concerned about? What describe you today? Describe your consciousness and what's going through your mind.
Well, I'm 87 years old, and so I'm not going to be around much longer. I regret that. I mean, I've had a terrific life filled with interesting things, but darn, I want to see what's coming next. And of course, you and I are talking right in the midst of the Democratic National Convention,
Yes.
and the politics of the time are so interesting to me. Quite suddenly, more interesting than they were a month ago or 2 months ago. So I'm exhilarated by that, and I'm kind of pissed off that I'm going to miss the interesting things that will lie ahead. And on top of that, the science uh, of the artificial intelligence, which scares us all, and will any writer be able to write a book again because AI can do it better? Who knows? Who knows? But the exciting things that can happen.
Yeah.
Uh, I'd like to be around for all of it. I wish I could go on forever.
I want to ask you about that because I had a thought the other day. All right, let's assume that when photography first came about and became around, it became more accessible. Painters went, oh, I mean, here instead of that, you're taking a photograph. So if we could take the same analogy that the analogy of writers and using the AI as a photographic like photography, using the analogy that there will be, because as a photographer, what beautiful art that you can make that you wouldn't be painting. But what if there is beautiful art that can be made in this collaboration with this amazing tool?
Yeah, yeah, and so I think we have to look at it that way, as full of possibilities, instead of, oh my God, the end of creativity. It may enhance creativity. You mentioned photography. Uh, when I started out as a photographer, well, I don't know what copy of The Giver you have. Does it have the face of the?
It has the black and white. It's the silver edition. It's the one the anniversary edition that has all the addenda in it.
Yeah, it's the same photograph of the man, but on the original cover, it was more clearly a black and white photograph.
Yes.
That's one that I had taken for a magazine article that I'd been assigned to write about a painter, and he was the man that I photographed. I remember writing him after I got home from my time with him that his photograph had been floating in the darkroom sink, and one of my kids had walked past and said, "Who's that Moses you photographed?" And so after that, when we corresponded, he always signed his letters, "Love Moses." But at any rate, that was a photograph I took with an M4 Leica with a handheld meter. I don't know if that means anything to you, but that was it was a very sophisticated camera for its time, but its time has long passed. And
Wow.
after that, I went to an SLR and all of that. And then everything became digital, and it wasn't exciting for me anymore. Uh, it was too easy, I guess.
When you look at your grandchildren and look at the life that they are living, do you see their curiosity? Do you because one of the things, like Richard Feynman, one of the gifts that his father gave him, because his father, even though he was the most brilliant physicist and went to MIT and did, Nobel Prize and all, but his father, who was a salesman, gave him the gift of curiosity. To be curious. I wonder why that is. What would you think and wonder what that was? And I just love that. And I can imagine your grandchildren. I would love to be there watching you talk with your grandchildren and to see this
My
experience.
grandchildren are now grown. The youngest just graduated with an engineering degree, and he's 23. Um, but they've been my grandchildren all along. And as you were talking, I'm sitting in what is my summer home. This is an old farmhouse, over 200 years old, and there are rolling meadows and a lot of land around here. And they used to spend a lot of time here with me in the summer. And I remember lying on the front lawn one summer night looking at the sky with two little grandsons who were probably 5 and 7. And the younger one leaned over to me and whispered, "I am very interested in space." And just be still my heart. But that's the same one who's now an engineer. And when I asked him, I mean, he's just working at his first job, and I saw him last weekend, and I said, "What is it you're doing?" And he told me, but I didn't understand any of it. But that was a good thing. I will.
Isn't it, isn't it a wonderful thing?
My only granddaughter is chairman of the English department in a high school in Germany, and so she's the child of my heart, because that's, had I not become a writer, I probably would have been a teacher. Now I've forgotten what your question was, but
Well,
it's
one of the things that I'm asking, because I asked you this before, what are the things when you think about, because you've been interviewed thousands of times, so many, for example, hyperbole, but basically thousands. What is are there any things that you have not talked about that might that you've wanted to talk about, or that you have, anything that is on your mind that is something that you'd like to express with us?
Oh gosh, that's an interesting question. And of course, if I'll wake up in the middle of the night tonight.
Oh, absolutely. Exactly. I know. And I'll receive this wonderful email from, well, this is the, yeah, go ahead.
I do remember that when I wrote The Giver, there was mention in it. I can't remember where the mention was, how it was used, but there was mention in it of a same sex couple, or that there were same-sex couples within the community. And the
Mhm.
editor asked me to take it out, thought it would be a distraction. I think
Mhm.
it was a male editor, which is unusual in books for kids.
Sure.
I think he was correct, and he had a good sense of what was appropriate for the audience. So I removed it. But, and I have not, well, yes, I have a new book. New book came out this spring, and there is mention, very brief mention of a same-sex couple. And I've already gotten some objections, one from Texas. That's you guys. Um,
Oh, I know.
so one, I don't want to pander to an, an audience of book banners, but I also don't want books to disappear and not be read because they might have something that
No,
causes
I mean,
problems.
here you have your judge. I mean, your judge, the bachelor judge with the gentleman that comes. We don't know his story. We don't know, but we do know that during all time in human history, there's been a span of our own relationships and how we have. I mean, that's just all part of it. About we One of the things that I love about today is the openness, because I know that when I was growing up, I felt like I was the one broken child, because I looked out and I went, well, I don't know what I'm doing. They don't know what they're doing. I don't know, what's going on. So it's, I love the openness and being able to talk about and being able to say, okay, each of us is an individual rather than having to conform to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so
And I
much
think
of it.
that's one of the things that the book The Giver does convey, the
That,
danger of conformity. I mean, I was talking about my grandchildren earlier. I had four children. I already mentioned that. One of them was killed in the military. So I have three living children, one of whom considers herself non-binary. I'm never exactly sure what that means, but I accept that. And I have four grandchildren, one of whom is gay and came out as a teenager, and we all just accepted it without question. But these are today's times. That could not have happened when I was a child
no,
or when I was a teenager. And it makes me sad in retrospect to think of the people who were hurt by that.
yeah.
Forced into a life that wasn't their true life.
In fitting and what they were, and that's really where I see in the growth that is happening, because in the giver, each one of those children has to find, is assigned a role,
Yeah,
whether it fits them or not. And it's another thing that I think that so shows our today culture.
yeah, yeah.
Huh. So
I'm
where, all right, so where, what are you writing now? What's on your writing tablet and your writing mind now?
uh, I started to look across the room to my desk to point to my computer until I realized I'm sitting here with my computer in front of me, right in this machine that I'm looking at.
Yes.
I am on page 93 of a manuscript. I don't really like to talk about what I'm working on
No, no,
because
no. I wasn't asking for that. I mean, I know with Elizabeth Gilbert, and she says that, that there are private moments that we need to keep while the magic has. And so I'm not asking you about that. I'm more asking you about the process. Is it a morning process? Is it the getting up, and how is Lois's process?
well, I have on my desk over there a copy of the Virginia Woolf book, A Room. Actually, it was an essay at the time, A Room of One's Own, because that's something that has become very important to me. And I remember when I was typing on my electric Smith Corona back when the kids were young. My kids still talk about this with a certain bemused kind of retrospect, that I had set up a little table with my typewriter on it in a little corner of Dad's office. Uh, that Dad's office in the house, but their dad was a lawyer. He had a big desk in the room that we called Dad's office, and I had this pathetic little table and this pathetic typewriter. Uh, but nonetheless, that was my little carved out space. And I have found that I've needed that space of my own. Uh, I need that isolation, I guess is the word. So I'm sitting in here, artfully arranged in front of the bookcases, like every talking head you've ever seen. And I realized sitting here and looking at myself that I'm sitting in front of a lot of paperback mysteries. I have pointed out that this is my summer home. That's where the paperback mysteries are. If you go to my winter home, there's a wonderful bookcase filled, alphabetically arranged,
With
uh,
hard,
collected letters and biographies and memoirs, which is my
right.
favorite genre. And I'm so sad there won't be any collected letters anymore because now everything is email.
Yeah.
Any rate, I got diverted there talking about my space, but I do need a space of my own. I'm lucky that this is a big old farmhouse, and I can be here in this room with the door closed. Uh,
Yes.
and that's true wherever I am. That I carve out my space and my
On your
quiet
own.
and my time.
So what's on what what currently in August the 22nd, what's on your reading? You know, you're reading for pleasure, you're reading for inspiration. Now, what is and what is?
I don't read children's books or young adult books because I'm a grown up. I like to read about people that I relate to, even
Yes.
though I delve back into my young self in order to write for young people. I'm looking across the room because I see the book I'm currently reading, and I'm trying to remember the full title. I bought 2 copies of it because my partner, Howard, who
Mhm.
is off in his own space in another
Okay, exactly.
house. I bought 2 copies so that we could read the same book and talk about it. And I chose a Booker Prize winner. So it's by an Australian author named Flanagan. And I believe the title is Passage to the Deep North. I may have that wrong. Any rate, so that's what we're currently doing. I usually have several books going on at the same time. And another one that I'm reading is a memoir, I guess it would be called, an autobiography by a neurosurgeon, because the manuscript that I'm working on requires some knowledge of the interior of the brain. And I have very little knowledge of that. That's terra incognita to me.
Yeah, me too, and because I'm fascinated with consciousness. How
Yes.
did this, how did this coalesce to become me?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's absolutely that sense of this out of all the opportunities, it coalesced to become me is just astonishing.
And what's inside here is a universe. Uh,
An entire universe.
I mentioned earlier about my father in his last months or years. He lived to be 92. Um, and I mentioned also, I think, that he was the son of Norwegian immigrants. He had always told me that his parents spoke Norwegian to each other when he was a little boy, if they didn't want him to understand what they were saying. And
Sure.
they wanted their children to be Americans, and so they did not teach them Norwegian. In his last months in a nursing facility, he suddenly began to speak Norwegian. And of course, nobody could understand him, but it's clear that's what he was doing. And I realized that as his brain began to disappear or disintegrate or whatever happens in there, it had gone down to its earliest memories, and there they were. And so somewhere in there is your own voice at age 4. It's really
Absolutely.
interesting. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so grateful that you spend this time with me, Lois.
Oh,
What
thank
a
you.
gracious person, and what a I love and there is something about consciousness. Now I know that matter and energy are conserved, but in my own theory of everything, I believe somehow consciousness is conserved. I don't know how. I don't know how. I mean, I think that whatever happens may be more complex. Like I think of an ant walking across uh, a differential calculus book, and that ant doesn't understand differential calculus. Well, I would think that my ideas to whatever might be is about that same leap. I might not even understand that I couldn't even understand that it's alive because I'm just an ant looking at differential calculus.
See, that makes me think that you, like me, looks at that sky the way my 5-year-old grandson did and said, I'm interested in space. The more we know, the more telescopes they put out there. I have trouble grasping the concept of light years. But when I mean, the other galaxies, the whole thing out there is just so amazing. And we are such a speck in it, and so unimportant, and yet
And
important to
yet, exactly, yet the opposite too. We
yeah,
are without it. We are absolutely vital.
yes,
We are irreplaceable.
yeah,
There is no there is nothing like a you or a me that ever has or was or will be. That's just it. And that makes us precious.
And also, do you ever think about how we're connected to the others? I mean, you can go crazy thinking that, but
Exactly. It is, and because the same instant, even though there are light years that we have, but the same instant happening across the galaxy is happening right now at that instant. That those two instances are happening exactly at the same time. The complete connection. It's a wonderful, it's a wonderful sense, and so that's where I think that however it is that you and I will transition to whatever it is, there not only will there be some continuity, but it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting in a way that we can't know right now, but it's going to be because your curiosity, your fire, your sense cannot be extinguished. It's eternal. I know that. I know that in the deepest part of
yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah, I know it too. And I'm delighted to hear you say it and confirm it for me.